Mike, we had a little clip of the interview there with Dara, and he talked in that interview quite extensively about this idea that Uber was going to be profitable someday, that this was a big goal of his, a big mission of his. I guess the question is, when you consider the trajectory of the company so far, how soon do you think they can achieve that profitability?
Hey, Romaine, thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it. I don't really have an answer to that. My hope is that they put this money to work and potentially increase pricing and profitability. And I think that the consumer market can sustain that because there's still such a big gap between the cost of a taxi cab and an Uber, and I think Uber provides, in most cases, a better experience. And I'm also hoping that they can use some of that to increase the pay for the drivers, because the drivers are such a critical part of the equation.
Well, that gets at the question. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people who like taking Ubers, and it's a compelling experience for the users, but we know drivers are, a lot of drivers anyway, are unhappy with the take rate that they get. We know that Uber would like to take more money itself and get to profitability. So the question is, do you think there is a sort of sweet spot where all the parties can be satisfied and it's a compelling product for the rider while the drivers and the company gets the cuts they need?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the internals of the business at all, but it seems to me like a simple equation. You test a couple different price points and see what works to satisfy both of those things and still maintain the drivership or the consumer ridership that you need.
You were in the seed round of Uber, so I'm pretty sure the fact that a company has now got to a $60 billion valuation plus has more than exceeded the expectations of what you thought this company was going to become in terms of a luxury delivery of your taxi via an app. But the picture now to sustain this sort of valuation and grow is that it will become an Amazon-like platform. It will grow into all sorts of elements of transportation and indeed into food and the like. None of us will need any sort of mode of transport that is personal. Your perspective on in terms of therefore how autonomous fits into that and really how realistic it actually is, Mike?
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Caroline. I think that, you know, I mentioned when I was on before that I was an early investor in Salesforce.com, and I see a lot of parallels. I think that, like the app exchange from Salesforce, the platform component and the multiple businesses of Uber provides a huge differentiation. They've got an incredible platform to build on. One example of that that I learned last week in talking with Dara is that the average rider does 4.5 rides per month. If a rider also uses Uber Eats, they do 11.4 rides per month. So that shows some combination of loyalty and network effect, which I think is pretty impressive. As far as driverless cars, I think that's very far away, but I don't work in the lab, so maybe it's sooner than later.
All right, well, Mike, so give us a little bit of your sort of knowledge just with regards to, I guess, this whole mobility space and the idea that, you know, how we get around is changing in one way or another, whether Uber is going to be the one leading this or not. I mean, where do you see all this going? I mean, are we really all just going to be sharing cars and no one's ever going to own anything anymore?
Well, I don't drive my car very often unless I'm bringing my kids to school. My favorite mode of transportation in San Francisco is the jump bike. It's faster to get across the city for me, and it's more enjoyable, frankly, than sitting in the back of a car. I'll take Uber if I need to respond to emails and things like that. We're also investors in something called Wheels, which is a rapidly growing, it's like something between an electric bike and a scooter. So it's a smaller electric bike. It's got a seat exchangeable battery. So it's easy to service, feels safer than riding a scooter. It's got larger wheels. So I think that's has real potential in the future. We're also investors in something called Kango, which is like Uber for kids. And we rely on that to get our younger kid back and forth to school. So yeah, I think there is huge upside for these mobility platforms.
I'm disappointed personally that we don't have the scooters in NYC, and I like coming out to San Francisco when I can and getting to ride them. And I know that, like, you know, these are all part of the roadmaps of these companies, other forms of mobility. but it doesn't seem like any of them are profitable either. And so I'm wondering, like, it's great that there's all these new opportunities for these companies, and they have their bike lines and their scooter lines, but are the unit economics any better for them, or is it just new avenues for them to make losses?
I don't know anything about Bird Lime or the others, frankly, but I can tell you that Wheels is on the right path toward profitability. It was just reported by Inc., I think it was today, that it was at least this reporter's favorite mode of transportation for all the scooter companies. So keep an eye on that one.
Okay.
Mike, I'm interested in the respect that you were seed investor, you therefore put money into Travis. Travis was a notable absence from the standing up there in the top of the NYSE, ringing the bell for obvious reasons. But many have said that Lyft perhaps has more power to drive through a lack of profitability for longer because of the overall share power that the two founders have. They have a lot of super voting rights. This now public Uber doesn't have a founder as a leader, doesn't have super voting rights, and perhaps has to bend more to the will of an investor base who wants profits. Does that worry you? And how did you think about the treatment of Travis Kalanick today?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Travis. I was glad to see him on the floor. I caught some Insta stories in advance of the ringing of the bell. And by the way, I was also really pleased to see Austin up there ringing the bell. And Dara did a really great job, I thought, giving recognition to Garrett, Travis, and Ryan Graves. And just to point out, I did not invest. I didn't meet Travis before I invested. I met him after I invested. I actually met Ryan in January of 2010, and I invested in Ryan. So I had met Garrett previously, but didn't even really know he was involved in the company. So I took the bet on the opportunity and on Ryan, and then was pleased to know that Travis and Garrett were involved. But I'm not sure. I wish you were up on the podium, but I don't know all the politics. I've been busy running companies and running funds rather than spending too much time on Uber the last few years.